Let's get straight to our panel. Joining us here in New York is S.E. Cupp, a New York Daily News columnist and host of the S.E. Cupp Show. Professor Michael Eric Dyson is an MSNBC political analyst and a professor of sociology at Georgetown University. And Democratic strategist Julian Epstein joins us too. Good day to y'all. Professor Dyson, when the president produced his long-form birth certificate almost a year ago, the matter, I'm assuming, should have been dead and buried. Now, Republican Congressman Cliff Stearns tells a voter, quote, "The question is it legitimate? That's where we stand now." Now, you just heard Rick Santorum in Top Line saying Republicans are the party of science, reason and faith. But it appears that this congressman has struck out on all three counts, hasn't he?
Well, this is a Stevie Wonder approach. He said, when you believe in things you don't understand, then you suffer, but superstition ain't the way. It appears that superstition is the ultimate reserve for those who are anti-science, anti-rational, anti-reason, post-enlightenment, faith-filled bigots who have no understanding of how we should make decisions based upon empirical proof. Empirical means you can verify it or falsify it through your senses. You can touch it, taste it, smell it, see it. What more does Obama have to do to prove to people at whatever level that he's an American citizen, that his birth certificate is legitimate? And I think that the far right continues to exploit the bigotry and the passionate unreason that is prevailing in this country. Now, unfortunately, it's been tagged Southern, but we know that this kind of anti-scientific irrationality is not the province of the South primarily. It's among a party that refuses to acknowledge the central tenet of his humanity. And I think this is awful, and I think Republicans of good faith and good conscience and good reason ought to stand up and say so.
To give credit, S.E., to John McCain, during the 2008 campaign, when he was presented with comments that suggested the president was an Arab and all these kinds of things, he took the microphone and he delivered a dignified correction. Where is Speaker Boehner issuing some kind of discipline to this Florida-based congressman?
I don't think that's
where is Eric Cantor?
I don't think so? No, I don't think that's their job.
Eric Cantor's the majority leader in the House?
I mean, where was the president when Alan Grayson spoke out? I mean, these guys speak out and say stupid things all the time, and it's not the job of Speaker Boehner or Eric Cantor to rein them in. It's up to voters to decide whether they want to re-elect those guys or not.
But isn't this issue much more serious, that people repeatedly insulting this president, repeatedly casting
aspersions? It's not serious, Martin. It's ridiculous. I mean, just as liberals would agree that truthers make liberals look bad.
S.E., why is it so difficult for Eric Cantor to stand up and condemn what Mr.
Why should he have to? He's not responsible for what this guy says.
This guy's a member of the majority in the House of Representatives.
It's not Eric Cantor's job to defend what every congressional member says.
I'm not suggesting that, but you and I know that this kind of a comment allowed to continue is damaging. It's untruthful, and it doesn't reflect well.
Congressional members say terrible things. I could think of Debbie Wasserman Schultz or Nancy Pelosi have said absolutely terrible things. It is not the job of the majority leader, the minority leader, the whip, the Speaker of the House to rein these people in. It's up to voters to decide whether or not they want to put those folks back in office.
Okay, Julian, do you think that Eric Cantor or Speaker Boehner should be doing something with this kind of comment by Mr. Cliff Stearns?
Yeah, and I just disagree with S.E. I mean, when the left referred to General Petraeus as General Betray-Us, I condemned that. When the left said some pretty nasty things about President Bush and called for his impeachment, a lot of us said that that was wrong. I think the point here is that when large members of one party say things that are very, very offensive, it is incumbent on the leadership of the party to either say that they disavow it or they agree with it. And silence, I think, just doesn't cut it.
But this isn't large numbers, Julian. That's just not true.
This has been huge numbers inside S.E., inside the Republican Party, who have questioned the birth certificate legitimacy of the president.
Hang on, what about the 50% in Tennessee who believe that he wasn't born here? What about the 52%?
I think there's a bigger point here.
No, sorry, carry on, Julian.
But look, S.E., there's a bigger point. It's a political point, whether or not you think it's their responsibility or the right thing morally to do. We talked about this Republican primary as being three men and a baby back in March. It really begins to feel like Three Stooges, because the slapstick quality of this has become unbelievable. The Republicans in this campaign season have managed to offend just about everybody: women, African Americans, Hispanics, gays, and now they're really offending so many of the independents by getting into this otherness quality reality that the president isn't somehow a legitimate citizen.
The candidates are not talking about birtherism,
it's not only wrong,
Julian.
Essie, it's widely offensive to people, and the fact that Republicans stay silent about this, I think, hurts the party.
Julian, we're talking about birtherism. We're not talking about the candidates. You're trying to make a parallel that isn't there. There is no connection.
No. Excuse me, Martin. Let me finish this point. This point. What I'm talking about, Essie, is a consistent message coming out of the Republican Party, whether it's the candidates or whether it's leading members in Congress, that say things that either the president isn't somehow legitimate or making repeated statements that offend women, offend African Americans, offend Hispanics. And the point that ties it together, Essie, is that the Republican leadership continues to stay silent, won't do the right thing, won't take that sister soldier moment the way President Clinton did in '92, and stand up to the Republicans and say what you're saying is wrong.
Just to Julian's point, though, Donald Trump, of course, was in the vanguard of the birtherism business. He was considering running. He's endorsed. But no, you were just saying that there is no connection between the Republican candidates and the issue of birtherism.
Is he an elected member of Congress? Am I unaware of a post
you were just saying that there was no connection between the offensive comments about the president and the Republicans in the race for the nomination. That simply isn't true, because Donald Trump made up a story about investigators going and trying to find out whether this birth certificate was accurate. And you and I know that at one stage Trump was considering running, and he's been visited by all of these candidates, and of course he's endorsed Mitt Romney. So there is a connection. That's just not true.
It's a really loose connection.
Okay, Professor, we'll disagree on that. But I wonder if Republican voters are beginning to cast aspersions on the president's faith in order to divert attention away from the fact that they are having a hard time accepting Mitt Romney's Mormonism, a religious group that many theologians regard as a cult and a corruption of Christianity.
Sure. I think that one is a substitute for the other. I think the otherization of Obama, making him appear like he's some Martian from another planet, somebody who's outside the pale, literally speaking, of the Republican Party and of the human race, as Barney Fife said, beyond the ken of mortal man. Here is a guy who's being read outside of the race, read in a racialized and in a religious fashion that continues to do damage to his reputation. Then, on the other hand, you've got Mitt Romney, who many conservative evangelicals are never going to pull the lever for because of their own religious bigotry against Mormonism. There will never come a day when those people, in the privacy of their own voting booths and consciences, will be able to pull a lever or dimple a Chad for a man who was a Mormon in this country, despite all of the progressive talk we speak about in regard to acknowledging one's faith. So I think that religious bigotry on both sides is playing off against each other here. And the tragedy is, to Essie's point, the point is that we don't expect Republicans to stand up every time and say something, but we are talking about a major issue where a major factual error is being repeated as fact, and the perception that Obama is somehow different than us. You know as well as I know that this is racial coding. This is not about old school 1960s racism. This is about the assertion of a fact, assertion of a truth, of a mistruth that continues to be repeated, and I think we have to address that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I got to say, birtherism is not a major issue. Gas prices and the president's sinking poll numbers are today's major issue. That's why you don't want to talk about it.
Actually, some people would say it's contraception and Rick Santorum. S.E. Cupp, Professor Michael Eric Dyson and Julian Epstein.